District judge ruled in Bangor the stand because healthcare workers did not prove their beliefs were infringed upon. The plaintiffs also did not prove religion was a primary reason for the state's action. Democratic Governor Janet Mills, in her vaccine requirement announced in August, allowed for medical exemptions, but not religious or philosophical ones. Some who challenged the mandate said they believed aborted fetuses were used in creating the vaccines. Maine has not accepted religious exemptions to any vaccine since 2019. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
In Chicago, a showdown is brewing over coronavirus vaccinations. Mayor Lori Lightfoot says city workers have until Friday to report their vaccination status, and those who've not gotten the shot will have to submit to regular testing or be suspended. The head of the city's police union calling on its members not to submit. Former Major League Baseball player and longtime broadcaster Ray Fosse has died following a long battle with cancer. He was 74. There are concerns about the team Fosse won 2 World Series rings with.
Speaking to the Sports Business Journal, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred expressed concern over the future of the Oakland Athletics within that city as the ball club remains locked in a standoff with local leadership over renovations to Ring Central Coliseum, as well as the possibility of a new ballpark.
Just because it's dragged on so long, and, you know, frankly, in some ways, we're not sure we see a path to success.
Top members of the A's organization made trips to Portland, Oregon, and Las Vegas, Nevada earlier this year. The lease at the Coliseum expires in 2024, with ticket sales currently dwindling as the A's drew fewer than 10,000 fans in 13 of their final 19 home games this season.
Fox's Matt Napolitano, and I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Great news, Guam! Chili's 2 for Dining is back. Enjoy a full-on meal deal made for 2 for just $35. Start with 2 Coca-Cola beverages, an appetizer to share, and 2 mouth-watering entrees like the sizzling personal fajitas, the mouth-watering honey chipotle steak and shrimp, or Chili's world-famous fall-off-the-bone baby back ribs. Available for a limited time. Dine in today or call 648-7377 to place to-go orders. Chili's is located on the 2nd floor of Tumon Sands Plaza. Chili's. Savor the moment.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, getting us started on the Thursday edition of Tall Tales. I'm Darrell Taggarty. I'm sitting in for Bob Klitzkie this afternoon. Bob's off island. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. You know, Ray Gibson this morning was talking about there was no news in the paper today that kind of grabbed him. There was nothing that really got his passion up. Now, maybe there's something in your life that is getting your blood up. And if so, then there's a telephone number to call. And it's not the one for behavioral health. you can call us, 888-8255. Let us know what is getting to you. I was just trying to go online and find out what's if there's anything that was sent over by Bob for this, suggesting to do for the show. But I'm kind of challenged with that at the moment. For some reason, we are, I'm not online, but maybe during the halftime I can go on my phone and see if there's anything there and bring it over to my laptop so I can read it. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with Zami Ikatni. And today we've got two really interesting editorials. Interesting to me. But they may be something in the weeds for you, but one is from the PDN, Necessity. Guam needs to expand and improve broadband internet. And the other one from the Guam Daily Post, while DOC gets front seat treatment, GDOE is sent to the back of the bus. So let's spend some time looking at these two items. Broadband internet and education for Zami Ikatni. In the PDN today, Necessity, Guam needs to expand and improve broadband internet. In this day and age, high-speed broadband internet is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. Broadband is key to expanding educational opportunities. Distance learning, such as online public school and college courses, require high-quality internet services. I just added that high. Quality internet services. High-speed internet also makes telemedicine possible, allowing patients to confer online with medical specialists who can share information and test results quickly. It's also a key component to businesses in a number of industries, as any company that has had employees working from home during the COVID-19 Wuhan virus pandemic can attest. Broadband is critical for operations. In the United States and Guam needs to invest in broadband internet as a core part of basic infrastructure, as important as good roads and reliable power. The U.S. ranks 17th in the world in broadband internet speeds, far behind the United Arab Emirates, South Korea, China, and others. We must strive to improve our capabilities for the good of all companies, the government at all levels, and citizens. The government of Guam hopes to make that happen. It's applied for a broadband infrastructure grant under the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's $288 million Broadband Infrastructure Program. The money would be administered by the Office of Technology and go to local telecommunications providers, according to Tyrone Titano, Director of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. The grant proposal is for two projects. $11.4 million to install 72 miles of buried fiber optic cable and 26 5G cell sites along the major routes in southern Guam, and $1.6 million, quote, to reduce internet lag time. The first would provide survivable broadband infrastructure and 5G broadband internet service to historically unserved and underserved residents, businesses, and institutions in southern Guam. The second project would help provide reliable access for telehealth, remote education and work activities, as well as improve access with the rest of the world. But GovGuam must not rely on these grants being approved. There needs to be a backup plan, such as tax breaks or sharing part of the cost, to incentivize private companies to invest in expanding and improving broadband internet on Guam. That's the editorial from the Pacific Daily News, entitled "Necessity: Guam Needs to Expand and Improve Broadband Internet." I've been in this business for a while, in telecom, When I'm not in politics, I have to do with radio or telecom work. And something just kind of rings hollow here. Not that I don't think that the broadband infrastructure initiative nationally should not go forward, and not that I don't think that the South should get broadband internet. But consider that 88% of the grant monies would go to fiber, optic cable, and 5G cell sites in southern Guam. We already have 3 major carriers who are all competing for business in Guam. If they don't think that the South is worth putting in infrastructure, so the government's going to pay for infrastructure for them to sell services, it's kind of odd. How about just one of them go ahead and put it in and sell services to the folks in southern Guam? The other one is, if everyone who is currently paying for data service, if it's a personal device, or broadband service, if it's a home or business, is going to have improved service through reduced internet lag time, reliable access for telehealth, remote education, and work activities, as well as improve access with the rest of the world. Well, that's another matter. Is it the government's to do? Guam residents and businesses have benefited from superior communications since trans-Pacific cables were laid and satellites launched. Local access has depended on business and consumer demand. Today's editorial points to a federal and GovGuam infrastructure initiative where the government itself will invest in capacity where businesses have not ventured. 88% of requested grant funds would extend broadband and 5G capacity to southern Guam, and 12% will reduce lag time for the rest of us. And how would this be? I'd like to hear Bob Kelly call in and ask and explain some of this to us, because I remember maybe 10 years ago discussing why it is that when someone on Guam wants to communicate from their customer of one of the providers and is communicating with someone who is subscribing to a different provider on Guam, the signal goes all the way to Los Angeles and back. And he explained it's because there's no local intranet ring, so that it just goes local to local address. It goes to the, there's an exchange. It goes to an exchange in the States and back. So the company that's with the person who's initiating the link is paying for that, his provider, to buy capacity on the fiber line to LA and back. How do you feel about government devoting infrastructure funds to areas where even a thriving competitive market doesn't provide service? Maybe you really like it. Maybe you think that the government should fill in every place where businesses don't. The PDN editorial encourages the plan to go forward if the grant is not approved, using local revenues or tax breaks. And I have to ask, is this the highest and best use of $11 million to assist and improve southern Guam? I mean, it's one thing if somebody's going to give us the money. Okay. That's their priority. It's not a local priority, or we'd be doing it. If we had $11 million, wouldn't it go to improving roads, bridges, and drainage? What about rezoning? This wouldn't cost much. Rezoning certain areas so private investment, including telecommunication, flows into the South. If you had the roads, if the roads were improved, there might be more investment in the South. And then the telecom would follow. And as for the $1.6 million to reduce latency, in effect, to improve quality to all traffic between local providers. The industry players should do this themselves. They always should have. They save money through less traffic to and from Los Angeles on the fiber connection. If the government's going to have to step in and enhance local service, say for telemedicine, so that a clinic that's subscribing to GTA and the hospital is on Docomo, it doesn't have to go to LA and back, but can go locally and not hit bottlenecks and whatnot. If that's what we're going to get, enhance local service and save the carriers money, shouldn't this be a government infrastructure project paid for by a surcharge on local broadband accounts? Users pay because, and the government says, you have to establish this. And if you guys won't do it, we'll do it, and you pay, and you have to repay us, because this isn't something that should come out of general tax money. But it's something that they save money doing. They just don't want to do it. Why is the government making it easier for Docomo, GTA, and IT&E to sell data plans? Don't get me wrong. I think Guam should be better wired for economic development and job creation. But I don't see a compelling public policy being articulated here in the editorial or even the editorial writers looking into the grant and explaining it to the rest of us where the compelling priority is as a public policy. Is this necessity, as the headline states, or a sexy way to compete for federal funds? Oh, look at our poor area in the South. It's underserved. It's like the southern Indiana or something. Or is it just another way to lower the cost of Netflix for those who can afford it? Or make money, or for the companies to make money selling Netflix at the same cost, but actually delivering it cheaper? Come on. I just, as I said, maybe Bob Kelly will call up and enlighten us about how wonderful this is. You know, $11 million to extend the 3 carriers all the way to the south for them with federal money. And 12% to improve service generally between the carriers. I think PDN really should have asked a few more questions before putting it in an editorial. As much as I am a fan of better broadband service on Guam, I think the telecom industry on Guam is one of the few bright spots in our local market that's thoroughly demand-driven, paid for by the consumers who use it, and not out of reach for anyone who has a bit of income. I think I have a phone that it's got a data plan. It's pretty much unlimited on my phone, and it's like $38. So it can be done. I know. And it's not like an old age plan either. It's not one of those AARP phone. It's not one of those. But
the jitterbug?
Whatever it's called. I don't look that closely at those.
It's a flip phone.
I used to have a flip phone. I love that flip phone.
I miss my flip phone.
Yes, well, they'll bring them out again. Because once it becomes cool again, once us old folks stop talking about flip phones, then the young people go, ooh, flip phone.
I miss real numbers, not just a screen. What I don't miss is dial-up.
Don't get me started on dial-ups. Man. Okay. Already,
I'm on the internet. Hang the phone up.
Already, we have a phone call already. So let's go ahead. Before I go to the next editorial, let's see what another Joe has on his mind. Good afternoon, another Joe. Welcome to Tall Tales.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. We can.
All right, cool. So the thing about broadband is there's been reports and concerns here and there about health effects on human beings, especially living close to the infrastructure, the hardware. Broadband, basically it's microwave technology, right, on a smaller scale, depending on how close you are maybe to it. And so there have been concerns about the effects on people living near this what is those towers that they use to the microwave towers, and also wildlife, whether it affects wildlife in any way. The birds and everything in the environment. But I don't know. Have you paid any attention to those concerns?
Oh yeah, in telecom we have to pay attention to them all the time because we are required to wear these RF badges when we're in and around the types of equipment that does send out what's called any kind of radiation at a level that will affect human health because it's cumulative and it is damaging. However, the consumer grade explanations of the effects of cell towers and whatnot, all of those installations are regulated by the FCC. They've been thoroughly studied, and they are set at levels and heights, minimum heights off the ground, and power levels designed not to harm people. If there is any threat to human health, it isn't power lines and cell towers. Microwave towers, if you get up in front of that microwave, it'll fry you. But they're set up so high off the ground, and you can't get in front of it unless you get yourself a ladder or hang from a tree or something to get in front of the wave, in front of the path. But if you the big threat, the only threat that I've heard of that has been scientifically shown to be significant is cell phones held up to your ear for like 6 hours a day, because the phone itself is transmitting, and your ear is only about it's about 3 inches from that transmitter to your brain, and that is the hazard. If there's any hazard, it's 3 inches holding a transmitter 3 inches from your brain. So, and there have been how many millions or billions of people holding cell phones 3 inches from their brain, and how many people are being seen for ill effects from radiation, ionizing or RF radiation, whatever kind that would actually take the molecules and rattle them enough to, it has to be a resonant point for the matter that makes up your cells. And that's mainly water. And that's why microwaves work to cook food, because it resonates water. Well, we don't stick our heads in microwave ovens, and we don't transmit at microwave frequencies in a way that that people can be in the path. You see the microwave drums, those are very tight beams. It's a very tight beam. It's like shining a flashlight. And so it's very, very tight. You don't and you don't stand up in that beam. They're set very high off the ground. So that's where that's at. And the rest of it is all supposition and fear and what ifs and science fiction.
Well, I'm with you, Darryl, with regards to the private sector usually does it the best. If they don't think it's worth their while to do this, then you sound as though they haven't done their homework. They haven't given a good enough explanation as to why should the government do this? Why should they come out with the 11 million, as you say, when it's not going to be profitable?
Well, the companies have done their homework. They aren't investing the money, either in the intranet, the ring, the local ring, or in capacity down south. The federal government's ponying up money, so Bureau of Planning, Statistics and Plans wrote up a grant, and they're hoping to get it. But the PDN editorial is saying that this should be done anyway by the government, even using local money. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what in the world? How'd you make that leap? It's one thing to say, yeah, we'll take free money, and we'll help our local business investors extend their service down south, because the money is sitting there. We may as well compete for it. But you know, to do it with local money, it's ridiculous.
You know, the other thing I'm apprehensive about is this is what they're doing. They're encouraging this as a form of changing the infrastructure to, for example, driverless cars. And at some point in time, the question will be, some of the arguments is, well, do you really want a 70 or 80-year-old driving around? So, you know, the question is, when are you going to start taking away licenses from elderly? And are you going to stop with that? You're going to say, hey, there's certain areas where it's more important to have driverless vehicles, and it's, you know what I'm saying? Now,
you know what I think this really is with the driverless cars and Guam?
What?
We're never going to have a mass transit system until there's driverless cars, until they have a bus that can drive itself, because obviously mass transit can't get its act together. And it'll be about that long before we have buses that can go down south, and the roads will be, you know, wired for. You know, Guam is actually a scale that we could have these things happening, but we can't even manage to keep the potholes, keep the surface on the road from turning into pebbles. How are they going to put in sensors along the way? And we don't even know where the pipes are under the road. How are we going to be able to keep track of? We can't keep lines painted on the road. How are we going to keep the lines, the virtual lines set for driverless cars to navigate on our roads? And that you're going to program the car to say, okay, to make a left turn at the twin coconut tree. Really, it's not going to happen. It could happen, but you know.
I hope you're right, Dad, because you're talking about a huge change in lifestyle, added restrictions of movement. And anyway, Dad, I just wanted to add my 2 cents worth. Thanks for. I'll just keep listening. Okay.
Thank you very much, another Joe, for calling us this afternoon on Tall Tales.
I think there's an argument to say that most cars on the road are already driverless.
Well, I was just towards the end of another Joe's call, I was thinking, well, if we don't have so much welfare, we could all have drivers. We could all afford to pay drivers, because we'll have people who will work for $1.40 an hour. And they just sit there and next to the door, and then when it's time to go, you toss them the keys, and they open the door for you. And then you sit back in air-conditioned comfort in your whatever car you've got, your Kia, and let somebody drive you. And then people are happy to work for $1.40 an hour.
Rickshaw.
Oh, I have a bicycle article. Talk about passion. Is it time for a break? Just in time. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy my coffee here, and I'll be looking forward to your phone call at 888-8255.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Contact Express Financial for all your financial needs. Express Financial is consumer lending at its very best. They also have a host of dealer service programs with quick approvals. There are 3 ways to apply. Over the phone at 637-9834. You may visit their office in person at 600 Harmon Loop Road across the street from Costules. Or you can also visit their webpage and apply at myexpressfinancial.com. In most cases, you'll get your money the same day.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie this afternoon. We were just talking with another Joe and taking a look at the PDN editorial today and kind of picking it apart. Let's go on to another one, which is actually quite an interesting and at the same time not interesting topic, but one we shouldn't get away from. And I agree with Ray Gibson that there wasn't really anything to really get passionate about today. And this is probably the best buzzkill of the entire government of Guam. And that is, while DOC gets front seat treatment, GDOE is sent to the back of the bus. This is the editorial from the Guam Daily Post. It's long, too long. And that may be the problem. That's not the editorial, that's me. Guam politicians have said on the campaign trail over many local elections that public school children are at the top of their priorities. Once elected into public office, voters then belatedly realized that the politicians who won their votes didn't really mean what they said, or at least they didn't take their campaign promises to heart. Really? Today's funding shortfall at the Guam Department of Education is an example of a promise that has been, well, broken. GDOE is scrambling to fill a $25 million shortfall so the department can adequately provide services to about 28,000 students. I need to mark that. Every time they use adequate services, that is a BK moment. It's a Bob Klitzkie moment, really. Guam's DOE challenges are enormous year after year because the budget it receives often leaves minimal funding for maintenance, where have we heard that before, and upkeep of mostly run-down, outdated schools as well as supplies. Payroll takes up the bulk of its spending. When the governor allowed the fiscal year 2022 budget to lapse into law, GDOE's budget level was at $206 million. Education officials had anticipated a smaller than requested budget. That's nothing new for the public school system. But there was an additional $4.7 million cut, leading GDOE officials to characterize this year's lean budget as, quote, worse than ever. About $187 million of this fiscal year's GDOE budget is earmarked for personnel costs, leaving roughly $20 million for essential operations. This shortfall has opened discussions on whether the local education department can use some of the COVID-19 federal funds to help local schools survive the school year. We hope GDOE gets federal approval to use pandemic aid funding for operations. But if its request is rejected, our public schools and our public school students will suffer. We all know that $20 million for 1 year to run dozens of public schools that serve thousands of school children is not going to be enough. Most senators know or should be aware of this. The governor's office, as well as the administration's budget and finance officials, are too entrenched in the system to say they didn't know. Knowing that the finances in GovGuam are limited, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic nearly wiping out the more than $2 billion tourism industry, which is not expected to fully recover for at least the next 2 years, any surprise funding, you'd think, would be allocated toward the core functions of our local government. And public education has been identified to be in the top 3 along with health care and public safety. But that hasn't been the case, even when a new funding well has opened up. There is a projection in GovGuam that the federal government will provide $60 million a year on top of the hundreds of millions of dollars the federal government provides year after year to GovGuam. The $60 million would help the local government after years of GovGuam-shouldered tax refund payments for local taxpayers who claim the federal Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC. What senators and the administration have done with the future EITC money is commit a big chunk of it toward annual debt payments for the billion-dollar new Guam Memorial Hospital project and related mental health and public health facilities, a project that's being billed as a medical, quote, campus. While healthcare spending and borrowing can be justified to some extent, but maybe not as a billion-dollar expense, the recent decision by senators and the administration to approve committing $5 million out of the EITC money for 1 year, and after that $5 million a year from GovGuam's general purse toward building a new prison facilities does raise the question of skewed priorities. It's true that public safety is also a top priority for GovGuam, but when it comes to public safety, funding support should go first to the cash-strapped Guam Police Department, which is at the front lines of the various crimes on the streets. To the everyday Guamanians choosing to fund debt payments for a bigger and better prison that will take years to build while the priority needs in public education are here, right now, is head-shaking. Our school children are being relegated to the back of the bus in priorities. One of the justifications for the new prison was that the way the prison is configured now, it's easy to throw drugs and other contraband over the fence. Would it make sense to fix the fence issue and reform prison enforcement to take care of the problem right away, instead of building a massive project that commits taxpayers for decades of debt payments? Sometimes when people are in positions of public power and trust, they can get caught in the weeds of legislating and policy decision-making. All they can see sometimes is what's presented to them. You can't blame the public schools for having that expectation that they'd be prioritized even without causing a stir. But they haven't been getting the full attention they deserve, as shown by the priority for a brand new prison over helping the public schools get through another challenging school year. But if the majority of these elected officials have kids or grandkids who go to public schools, the ones with classrooms that should have been demolished many years ago, the ones with classrooms that get flooded or ransacked every so often, the ones with toilets you don't want any child to go near, they'd speak up and ensure that the students' needs would not be an afterthought. Yes, there has been attention to one school, Simon Sanchez High School, which could get rebuilt. But there are many others worse off than Simon Sanchez. Ask parents and students. Ask teachers. They know. And that is the editorial in today's Guam Daily Post. It's long. It pits DOE against the legislature, the budget, the governor, the folks who at administration and BBMR, and against DOC and the police department. But the fact is that the Guam Department of Education gets more money than any other function in the budget, and it's never enough. They get the most. Even Aline Yamashita, in a PDN column, her regular weekly PDN column today, is clamoring for higher pay. Teachers want higher pay. The superintendent wants funds allocated to charter schools. He wants the money that goes to charter schools to come back over to DOE for its schools, and for the legislature to fund the charter schools separately. And I can't argue with any of that, except to say this. I want to see better outcomes. And that may be the real problem here. After a year and a half and assistance with laptops, GDOE is only delivering 50% of the services for 100% of the budget. Look at how long this editorial is. How can parents of public school students feel that they can weigh in on a system that is so large? It isn't just their kids' schools. All schools are in the same condition. And so the impact of any local school or village level solution is diffused to the whole system. Any improvement made at one school level is absorbed. And because of that, how can parents get a grip on the legislature and change priorities? How can the legislature get a grip on DOE and change priorities? When the priority really is in paying higher salaries. And they're saying so they can get more teachers. And there are then there's layers like an onion. There are more and more problems. And at some point, you would think that all the people working in DOE and with the school policy board and the legislature would be able to figure it out. If they can't figure it out, how are we supposed to figure it out? And we're supposed to hold them accountable politically. And they all point fingers at each other. And I think they're just gaming us. So, thank you. I kind of wish the Post had made the editorial about one column long to focus our attention on where they think pressure should be applied by the public on its government, and whether that should be to elected officials or the appointed officials. That's what's needed, is focus. To me, I want focus to be on outcomes. I don't think that I would want to limit the amount of money we could spend on education if we got better results. But they're asking us for more money for the same results. And right now, they're only delivering 50% of the results. So really, it's not a good time to ask for more money or expect more money, unless the feds want to give us more. I've got Bob Kelly on the line. You know, Bob, we had an editorial about the in the PDN today. Did you see that editorial?
No, but I was calling about the Post editorial about funding.
DOE funding.
Yes.
Oh, you're not talking about the need to expand and improve broadband internet?
Well, that could be the next call.
Okay, well...
Actually, what I wanted to point out is there are multiple priorities that a local government, such as Guam government, have to fund. Education is a high priority. So is health. And that's kind of where the hospital, public health, and what's going on over there goes. But another one is also public safety, which involves everything from the police department to the prison to our emergency services, both the Office of Emergency Management as well as ambulance and fire. These are priorities that all have to be fully funded and maximally used. You can't sit there and say, we're going to put education above public safety, which is, I think, what the Post was implying about DOC. And let's look at two things at DOC. We don't keep an adequate prison facility. We either have to release people who shouldn't be released, or we'll probably end up in receivership. And we know after going through the receivership for solid waste, that really doesn't save the government of Guam any money.
No, it doesn't. That's right. I pointed that out about a week ago.
So that ends up costing even more.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't fix up the prison, we're going to continue expending overtime and needing more DOC correction officers and more overtime because the facilities are not properly constructed to minimize the correction staff and maximize the security with the minimum number of people by using proper layouts and proper automation. And the amount of money spent to bring a new prison in is going to be paid back over the long term by reduced staffing costs. So I disagree with the Post on this totally. They're not looking at the picture correctly.
And this was explained completely at the time when the bill was going through the legislature.
Then apparently the Post didn't have a reporter there.
Well,
they would understand it. Or else they didn't understand. You're either going to pay in a lot more staffing and still have inadequate facilities, or we're going to bring it up to the standard of a modern correctional and confinement facility and be able to meet the needs of keeping people. We know a lot of people need to be kept off the street. Just look at the daily magistrates reports. If we don't take care of that, then we're going to have increase in family violence, drug use, and so on, because they're just going to be bringing the people back out to reoffend if we don't put that in. Now, we certainly need education, training, and rehabilitation at the prison, and they need to be able to have adequate facilities for that, or we're just going to put somebody in there for a few years and bring somebody back out that has got the same problem and repeat offender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, modern
So
prison.
I don't agree with the Post on that. I agree that we need to put priority in schools, but where are we going to take the priority from? That's the open question at the moment. We need health care. We need public safety. We need what we don't need technically is we don't need Chamorro Village. That's not a mandate of local government. It's important, and certainly it's a beneficial thing for our tourism. But as we go down the line, there are many things the government's doing now that don't fall into the absolute core responsibilities of health, public safety, and education.
Are you talking about Agana revitalization?
Well, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but is that more important than education, health, and public safety?
No. I'll say it. I'll say it for you, Bob. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I got your point. Yes, thank you very much. Now, next time you call,
you don't
we're
take
going to talk
away
about...
from the Department. You should not take away from the Department of Corrections to increase funding in education, because they have to have the money. If they end up under receivership, the government will even be poor, because the receivers end up costing us more money than what it costs us to do it ourselves.
To do the thing that we already know, that we already know we have to do.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the problem with solid waste. What the legislature just did, and the governor, by signing the bills, just did, was avoid the prison and the hospital from going into receivership, and having the government of Guam build for an off-island manager at $1 million a year, telling us exactly how to do what we already had plans to do.
That is correct. So that's why I disagree with it. And I think that we did spend money to hire a very good consultant firm to come in and review the prison and make a plan that is not only a short-term immediate plan, but goes into the medium and long term. Let's look at the plan. If we need some revisions, do it, but let's follow the plan. That's why we spent the money to hire professionals to give us a good plan.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the plan, we'd probably be in receivership right now.
Well, I think that we can take care of the prison, but we need to follow the plan that's out there, and the legislature starting the funding on that is correct. And that's why I disagree with the Post.
Well, thank you very much, Bob, for calling us
Have a
this
good
afternoon. Okay. Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly's, he knows a lot of stuff.
Especially the first editorial.
Yes, but he said that would be for another call. Maybe in the second hour, I'll bring it back up and we'll talk about it again. Anyway, it's time to take a break here, and we'll come back with more of you and your calls at 888-8255.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie this afternoon. And we've been looking at the editorials today in the Guam Daily Post and the Pacific Daily News. And neither one of them, both inciting thought, but not really pointing in a direction that I feel like following. It's a good thing to make us think about, but not. It's kind of thin on the recommendations, and so we'll just leave it there. I don't know if you saw this in the Guam Daily Post on page 19. There was an opinion that was reprinted from the Washington Post, and that's not something you hear very often here on this station, but it's called A Man, His Bicycle, and an Incredible Gift to the World. It's about a man who called himself the Bike Wanderer. He was from Europe, and he got a bicycle, and he bicycled from the Arctic all the way down through the Americas to South America, and communicated his experiences along the way. I really like the idea of riding, and it's because I have been doing that since I was a kid. You know, just from Harmon Village up to Dedido, down to Tumon Bay, or out to out in the along the cliffline area up behind Nick Tam's, on some of the old World War II or pre-war roads. And then as I was growing up and living in different communities, riding my bicycle and touring. But what the reason that's me, but the reason I bring it up here, and the article reminds me, is that there are people who come to Guam among the million-plus tourists that we have, who are coming from communities where they ride bikes. And they, coming from a place where the air is smoggy, dirty, lots of traffic, cold. And they come here and they go, wow, this is wonderful. This is beautiful. I think I want to get on a bicycle and just kind of ride around. Sometimes you'll find people who are coming here and they bring their bicycles and they try to ride around the island. And it's so difficult for them to enjoy themselves. The ones who are, really extreme into fitness and distance riding, it doesn't matter to them because they're already steeled to that risk on the roads. But the ones who come to Guam to enjoy our island and want to see it from the seat of a bicycle get a hard time. And there are beautiful places to ride where you don't get a hard time, but they're hard to get to. Like the ride from Billy Bay to just before Bear Rock and back. Not in the middle of the day, and not when people are in, rush hour trying to get to work or coming home from work. But during some times of the day when it's just a sleepy road and the pace is just right for a bicycle. And we don't do anything to encourage that. There are businesses that will rent bicycles to go from Tumon up to the mall, and that's a wretched ride up that hill. I'll tell you, it's bad. For a person who rides, it's bad. And we don't have a friendly bicycle area, or we don't even point them out to people, to our visitors. And so, not saying anything about the way that you drive on the road, but as something as simple that would benefit us as hard shoulders, and continuous hard shoulders, not hard shoulder and then it stops and there's a guardrail and zero shoulder and grass, which is really, really a hazard because everybody squeezes down and they're going to be in that lane. Whether you're walking, you're riding a bike, or you're driving. But if we had hardened shoulders, we would have better drainage during heavy rain, and we would have safe places for people to ride, not in the lane. I just want to bring this up because it's here. It's a story about a guy who rode his bicycle from the Arctic Circle down to Argentina, and he's from Bulgaria. And any of us could do that, if just for a couple of years. It's just about 5 o'clock and time to take a break here, our halftime show, and see what's going on with Fox News in the rest of the world. I'll be back in about 7 minutes or so, and we'll take your calls at 888-8255.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Work longer. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. That's what President Biden says will solve the backlog of container ships waiting to unload at West Coast ports, announcing the Port of L.A. has agreed to start operating around the clock.
By staying open 7 days a week, through the night and on the weekends, the Port of Los Angeles will open over 60 extra hours a week.
But Jeff Freeman, the CEO of Consumer Brands, says that won't be enough.
The private sector is doing just about all it can right now to address these issues, but we have a labor shortage in this country. We have too few workers, too few people driving these trucks, too few people in other aspects of the industry. We've got to figure out how we infuse more labor into this workforce.
Last week, the government reported the labor participation rate dropped again in September. Hundreds of police officers in Chicago could be off their jobs by Saturday in the face of a vaccine mandate from the city.
The FOP president says there could be half the officers on the street this weekend if his members are forced to vaccinate or even file their vaccine status by Friday.
This is not a strike. This is not a work action. Our officers will go to work, and they will be told, I guess, by the city to go home. You are now in a no-pay status. It will be the city's choice to make this city less safe come Friday.
The mayor standing by her vaccine mandate, calling it a public safety issue if city employees don't get vaccinated.
That's Elizabeth Matthews of Fox 40 in Chicago, who reports two of the city's lawmakers are now asking Mayor Lightfoot to hold off on the vaccine mandate. The House Select Committee on the January 6th Capitol riot has subpoenaed a former Justice Department lawyer. Jeffrey Clark reportedly urged his supervisors to investigate possible fraud in the 2020 election. More than 500 pages of internal documents from the D.C. Metropolitan Police about the fatal shooting of Ashley Babbitt at the Capitol show she was not armed and questioned whether the Capitol police officer issued a warning before opening fire. America is listening to Fox News.
There's so much that's new with the Eat Fresh Refresh
refresh at Subway restaurants that we can't possibly fit it all into one radio spot, but I'm gonna try. There are amazing new toppings like hickory smoked bacon, bacon and smashed avocado. Try your favorite sub on the new breads like the hearty multigrain wheat or the artisan Italian white bread. Not to mention Subway's thicker, juicier steak. That's all I have time for. You gotta refresh to be fresh. Only at Subway.
More than 10,000 workers have gone on strike against John Deere after rejecting a contract that offered 5 to 6% pay raises. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, the union representing film and TV crews, says its 60,000 members will strike Monday if they don't have a new deal by then. A big wildfire is spreading near Santa Barbara, California.
Strike teams are coming in from throughout Southern California, and now additional resources are coming in from the federal government. It's closed Highway 101, and thousands of vehicles have been relocated into mountain passes, and one of the goals is to get Highway 101 protected from fire and reopen, along with the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, and that would restore Amtrak service as well. They're also going to be doing property assessment. A number of ranches have structure protection, but some of the buildings there, we understand, have been damaged, possibly destroyed. The firefighters say this is going to be a long haul, possibly a 3-week fire, based on what they've seen in the past.
John Palmentary of Fox 11 in L.A. reports the Alisal fire has charged 24 square miles. An apartment building fire in Taiwan has killed at least 25 people and injured dozens more. That 13-story building engulfed in flames while most of its occupants were sleeping. A county in Oregon has issued a state of emergency over what's growing there.
The Jackson County Board of Commissioners says law enforcement and other officials are overwhelmed by an increase in the number and size of illegal marijuana farms. The commissioners warn the illegal production of cannabis presents an imminent threat to the public health and safety of its citizens. They're asking Governor Kate Brown and legislative leaders for help. Illegal marijuana grows are nothing new on the West Coast, but a mega drought is creating a sense of urgency. The growers steal water for their operations, depriving farmers and homeowners of a precious resource. Recreational marijuana is legal in Oregon, but some growers and processors move their product through the black market to avoid taxes and other regulations.
Fox's Steve Rappaport, and I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
It's back on. Mark it down. October 30th, Michelob Ultra presents the GSPN Imas Met Good competition. Guam's strongest man and woman will be determined at the Paseo ground. Come, watch our island's strongest compete in the Triple J truck pull, the Paradise Fitness log lift, CTV and Pacific tire flip, the ITNE wheelbarrow course, Guam Army National Guard warrior walk, and the Isla Imports mini truck lift. There'll be a beer garden and food truck, so leave your chow and drinks at home. They're not allowed at this free event. Who will be Guam's strongest man and woman? Find out Saturday, October 30th.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice. Octopus Tinactac Chamorro platter. And their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumon. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
And welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie, who is off island. I was just out front talking with a good fan of this show, a big fan of this show, Jim Atkins, and he was relating to me that something happened just about a week ago, and that had to do with cyclists on the road and his effort for people to have avoid like mowing down like about a dozen cyclists. If it wasn't for his evasive driving and allowing some traffic to swerve around the cyclists, there would have been something besides COVID on the front pages. And so we were having a conversation about traffic and cycling and exclusive use of roads and non-exclusive use of roads and people knowing how to behave on a road. And I've been riding, as I've told you, on the Guam streets and other streets since the 1960s. And there's one thing I always have on my bicycle, or I don't get out on the road at all, and that's a mirror. Just like any car, you're supposed to be able to see who's behind you, coming up. You're supposed to be completely aware of everything. So many cyclists these days think that just because in Guam law a bicycle is defined as a vehicle, that it has complete equal rights on the road. And in the black and white of the law, it does, as a vehicle. But as a driver or as a rider, you have responsibilities. Not to hit the next guy. It doesn't matter if it's a truck or a car or a pole or a pedestrian or a dog or a cement block that fell off the truck in front of you. You're responsible. And there are some cyclists who insist on riding and taking the whole lane. And in a pack, 12 people riding 3 abreast, four sub-packs of 3 out socializing on the road, which is, as I was talking with Jim, pointing out, it's the same as people socializing in a car driving down the road. Your attention's not fully on the road. And the road is not a park. It's not a lark. And yes, I think I should be able to ride my bicycle from Jigo to Molesu and not be harassed. Because we shouldn't be harassing each other in public spaces anyway. If I'm there first, I'm there first. But would I go out there and have attitude to the next guy? If I'm holding up traffic, I get off the road and I let the traffic go by. Why would I want to hold people up because I'm slow? I have to be considerate. And I would expect other people to be considerate of each other in any situation. And that's why Jim dropped by. He had to. He heard me before the break, and he was driving by. He pulled in to speak with me directly. And I want to thank you very, very much, Jim, for bringing this to me and for me to bring it to you, listening in the Tall Tales audience, because Guam is a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place. We shouldn't take it for granted that we can just give each other attitude. There's enough meth heads out there that we can't account for. There's enough people who are having a really bad day for whatever reason that we can't account for. There are people who are malicious, who are looking for a mark. And there are people who have to be out there driving for a living. They're driving fuel delivery trucks, or they're driving food delivery trucks, with containers to the stores, or cuts of beef to a restaurant. There are people in rental cars, and there are just commuters. And there are people who are going out on a date, and there are whatever the reason for being on the road. We have to be aware of that it's for everyone to use, including cyclists, but the cyclist has to remember that the rest of the world doesn't stop for them. So, isn't it beautiful out there? And there are many people who would like to see Guam from the seat of a bicycle. I've taken my bicycle to, and I don't mean to bore you with the story again, okay? I've taken my bicycle to Rota several times, to Saipan, and then to Tinian. I've taken it to Taipei. And when I travel to the States, I'll borrow or rent a bike, and I'll just go cruise around in the area where I'm visiting. See it from the seat of a bicycle. It's a different experience. It's a different way of experiencing a location. It's a different way of touring. And so, again, thank you, Jim, for dropping by and letting us know about what's on your mind. I guess he could have just called in, but I'm glad that he came by. There was a very interesting article in yesterday's Post on page 19 that I didn't get around to, but I think it's a good time to bring this up. It's written by Elaine Luria, and if you don't know who she is, I'll tell you at the end of the article. The article is called "Congress Must Untie Biden's Hands on Taiwan." Earlier this year, during hearings before the House and Senate, current and former commanders of our forces in Asia indicated that China might take military action against Taiwan in the next 6 years. Already, tensions across the Strait of Taiwan are rising rapidly with incursions by a record number of Chinese aircraft. In response, the Taiwanese foreign minister said last week that Taiwan is preparing for war. The Biden White House continues to affirm America's long-standing commitment to a democratic Taiwan as, quote, rock solid. And we now know that U.S. Special Forces and Marines have been operating as trainers in Taiwan for at least a year. As members of Congress crafted this year's defense budget, we took steps to build more ships than we decommission, accelerate the construction of submarines, add additional aircraft, and bolster our investment in the Pacific Defense Initiative. The problem is, we must have both the force with which to deter the Chinese and the legal authority to employ it. And right now, we do not. No amount of rhetoric or military spending will stop the Chinese if Beijing is intent on taking Taiwan by force because of one simple fact. Under the War Powers and Taiwan Relations Acts, the President has no legal authority, without the express authorization of Congress, to use military force to defend Taiwan. The legal limitations on a president's ability to respond quickly could all but ensure a Chinese fait accompli. Simply put, the president has no legal authority to react in the time necessary to repel a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and deter an all-out war. According to the Taiwan Relations Act adopted in 1979, quote, the President and the Congress shall determine in accordance with constitutional processes appropriate action by the United States. But without congressional authorization, the War Powers Act limits the President's ability to respond only in cases in which an, quote, attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces, end quote, has occurred. Waiting to seek congressional approval until after China acts would likely cause an insurmountable delay in responding to a hostile action by China to seize Taiwan militarily. Without the ability for the president to react immediately, any delay would prevent the United States from responding at a lower level of conflict to repel an invasion and de-escalate the situation. In 2001, President George W. Bush replied to an interview question about whether the United States had an obligation to defend Taiwan. Quote, "Yes, we do, and the Chinese must understand that." End quote. At the time, the then senior senator from Delaware, Joe Biden, excoriated him in the Washington Post. Quote, "The president should not cede to Taiwan, much less to China, the ability automatically to draw us into a war across the Taiwan Strait," Biden wrote. Times have changed, and Biden is now president, and he should consider the severe limitations on his ability to respond to an invasion of Taiwan. My Republican colleagues introduced the Taiwan Invasion Prevention Act in February to grant the president the authority to act against an invasion of Taiwan and prevent a fait accompli. This act is a good starting point to address a legal dilemma. The act does not change the One China policy in effect for 40 years. It does not require the president to act, but rather grants the commander-in-chief the necessary authorities for decisions to be made in hours, not the days or months congressional debate may take. That could be the difference between limited conflict and global war. This legislation is a starting point for debate, not a finished product. If the president's hands remain legally tied in preventing Chinese military action against Taiwan, then an even larger conflict with China is most certainly assured, resulting in potentially disastrous loss of life on both sides and plunging the global economy into recession for a generation. The time for this debate in Congress is now, not when conflict occurs. As Woodrow Wilson International Center Fellow Michael Kaufman writes, quote, "Chinese leaders either believe they will have to fight the United States for Taiwan or they do not. It is time to untie the hands of our president so that he can, in fact, carry through with the, quote, rock-solid commitment to Taiwan if actions by China require it." Representative Elaine Luria is a Democrat who represents Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. She's a 20-year Navy veteran and vice chair of the House Armed Services Committee. Congress must untie Biden's hands on Taiwan. An opinion from the Washington Post that was printed in yesterday's Guam Daily Post on page 19. I see I've got Repeat on the line. Hey there, Repeat. How you doing today?
How you doing? That is a very interesting conundrum, huh? Untie Joe so you can tie one?
Taiwan on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I was kind of concerned because the Chinese would have to attack U.S. forces or Guam or the mainland or any of the 50 states to draw us into defending Taiwan. But as long as they don't touch us, then they're free to take Taiwan because they know the U.S.
The way other people will view this is like, well, you know, U.S. is posturing for war and is, you know, rattling its sabers again, so on and so forth. Diplomacy, you know, supposedly is supposed to work. So we ought to try that, right?
Well, diplomacy is war by another means.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise it's like commercial, you know, otherwise it's just the normal, you know, contracts in commerce. You know, it has nothing to do with government.
I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to talk about something else.
Go ahead.
That's why I called in. If you don't.
No,
yeah,
it's okay.
I just wanted to talk about the big mullet.
The big mullet?
Yeah, you know what's mullet, right?
Yeah, but who?
Well, St. Nicholas and Moylan, when they got mullered about, the mayors are supposed to get $32 million.
Well, so...
You know, it turns out they didn't even do their own homework, and if they would have done their research, they would have known that that that's just not accurate.
Yeah, you know, I always wonder why it is that that people get outside their area. You know, it's
so that they, it's for the press, the free press. But here's the thing, the point that I wanted to make about the big mullet is what I call it. Both St. Nicholas, St. Nicholas, first of all, didn't know the right answer. He was asked by Moylan and gave him the wrong answer. He said, hey, why don't we just go ahead and look? And they looked, and they did very superficial research and came up with the dead wrong answer. But the other issue is it shows that he was sleeping at the wheel, if anything, because when this stuff was being debated in Congress, this should have been an issue that he picked up on and should have tried to resolve before the bill got passed. Right?
Well, sometimes a bill is passed, and then the way that it is administered by the federal government expands on the language that was used in the law.
Right, but he could still have had influence, Treasury and all that.
Not really. It's if it's up to the administration's interpretation of how that money is going to be used. It's between Treasury and the local administration that's going to sign for it. Does the government of Guam accept the terms and conditions of this particular batch of money? And that's when the governor has to go back and ask. But we don't have counties.
Right, but everything is born in Congress, and so that's the place where they have to make clarifications and qualifications. And that's why we have a congressman in Congress, not for him to go take naps or deliver chocolate chip cookies.
Well, and something like this, it wouldn't. In order to get anything done in Congress, everyone has to vote on it. So even if St. Nicholas wanted to put clarifying language in there about Guam villages, that probably wouldn't happen. They would just say, push it through, and you let them figure that out later on.
That's where they do. That's why they have all the markups and meetings like that, and that's why he got called in by the House leadership, because he was absent from all those things. Anyways, be that as it may, the big mullet, right? It's very interesting why St. Nicholas and Moylan keep teaming up on stuff like this. It's like they're telegraphing what's going to happen for the gubernatorial race, and that's what I was calling in about. I just wanted to say out loud that if we have a team of Moylan and St. Nicholas as governor and lieutenant governor, Guam is going to be in a world of hurt, because these two have proven over and over again that they're not ready for the big leagues, that they're, Moylan especially, they've just had half-baked ideas, both of them though,
but
have had half-baked ideas after another. Guam is in trouble.
Why do you put it? Why do you put it in such terms? For two reasons, I have to point out. You're projecting that they're going to win, and if they do win, they would only win if the majority of people thought that was a better option than the alternative, whoever the alternative is. And would you really?
All I'm saying is if they become governor and lieutenant governor, I wasn't projecting that they're going to win. I'm saying that Guam is going to be in a world of hurt, because we have two amateurs that don't know what they're doing that's going to run this island.
But you see, you keep posing the possible, imagining the possible. If they win, we will be in a world of hurt. But the thing is you have to give credit to the people of Guam to look through some of this stuff and let the campaign begin. You can be part of the campaign. You've actually started now, which is fine. But I've got a lot more faith in the people of Guam than to elevate a couple of novices to the most important office of the land.
I hear you, Daryl. But I've seen the manipulation that these two have with the press, and how people just eat it up. So and they are very high vote getters, by the way. So I'm not projecting that they're going to win, but the possibility is actually real.
You know, reality is always scarier than fiction, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks for the time, Darryl.
Well, thank you very much for the call. Repeat, we talking to you again soon. Let's take a break here, and we'll come back, and I've got Frenchie on the line next.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
To Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. And we've got Frenchie on the line, waiting in the wings. He wants to talk about... What was that, Frenchie?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
I didn't hear the beginning of the conversation you just had, but I said, oh, that sounds like repeat. It's probably...
It was repeat.
Lou's probably going to make a statement tomorrow. Usually repeat calls just before Lou.
Well, she's not calling my show. I don't know.
I love his argument because what's the alternative, Lou and Josh? Like they know what they're doing?
Well, they know what they're doing.
Well, they know how to pad Bank of Guam's accounts. That's all right.
I was wondering whether it's like storing nuts for the next winter.
Yeah, no, I think something's going to happen, but it's not. I don't know. He's like rabid. He sees red he's like a bull seeing red as soon as he hears San Nicolas.
Yes. Yeah. He does have
he loses it completely.
No, he just feels the need to get up and campaign. That's all.
Yeah, well, that's fine. So anyhow, last time we talked about Taiwan. I kind of explained a little bit why Taiwan is caught in a strange. What was the name of that series in the 60s? You have entered the twilight zone.
Well,
Taiwan is a little bit in the twilight zone because some of its leaders failed to claim independence where it was still possible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then the U.S. made that. Actually, China always presents, and until Biden, who did so 10 days ago, to recognize one country. No leaders, American leaders actually had recognized one country. They had recognized the two systems and the possibility of one country. But it's what they call the 3-dash communication on the cross-strait things, and it's of course Biden is asleep. And it's not because he wants to take a nap. It's because he's just old. But we know he's not pulling the strings in the back.
Oh, you just want Kamala Harris as president. Come on, admit it.
No, I don't. Listen, I know. I have had the displeasure of meeting the lady. That's the last thing I wish on the American people, is Kamala Harris.
Then you need to keep Biden awake. That's all.
Well, anyway, Susan Rice and that gang is running the place, and it's not pretty. But where we're at right now, and that column I read yesterday in the paper is, I don't know where she's going with this because it does not reflect the reality. We already, like you mentioned, we already have for over a year that was done by the Trump administration to kind of force the hand of the Biden administration in case they lost, which they did, in sending Marines and special troops in Taiwan as technical advisors. But we have had a physical presence in Taiwan through the CIA for the last 60 years. Penghu, Penghu Islands, which is in the middle of the strait between Taiwan and China. It's a beautiful area, actually. It's an old volcanic crater that collapsed, and it almost looks like a coral reef, but it's a volcanic crater. It's beautiful. It's called also the Pescadores Island, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Penghu has had one of the most busy CIA listening operations for the last 60 years. And Yangmin Chan, which is Yangmin Mountain, which is right in Taipei and used to be part of the old Chiang Kai-shek coastal defense thing, has the most powerful listening electronic device in Asia. So it's out there. They are there. There is a system of tunnel all over Taipei. And the Americans have been there for a long time. But the thing is all about politics. Let's agree that China attacks Taiwan. It just doesn't happen overnight. It is estimated that they would need about 10,000 boats to lift enough troops to do the landings on the 5 large beaches that would allow landings by hostile troops, which are heavily defended, could easily be mined all over the coast, 5 miles away, which makes the approach extremely difficult. And bringing 10,000 ships together for a landing would be seen well in advance. It's not something that happened overnight. Then Taiwan also has missiles, which they have not used because they don't want to tip their hand, that could actually strike those places of launching in China, and it could be a disaster for this. Then after they would have the need to attack U.S. bases and Japanese bases in Japan and U.S. bases in Korea, and they would have to do a strike against Guam. They cannot take the chance of not neutralizing those bases. When I say Japan, that includes Okinawa as well.
Right, of course.
So
that's the closest.
And the Japanese have been militarizing the islands right next to Taiwan, between Taiwan and the Diaoitas, which the Japanese call Sankaken Islands or something like this.
Yeah, Senkaku.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so which were private until about 6 years ago. As far as the will of the Taiwanese people, it was made very clear during the Ma administration. Now, President Ma was really trying to bridge the gap between the mainland and Taiwan, and he embarked in a series of policies that were very highly unpopular, trying to make it difficult for Taiwanese people that had invested in China under Chen Shui-bian to try to repatriate their industries to Taiwan. And that basically was running forward to do the reunification between the KMT and the CCP. What happened was something that was that I was not expecting. I was in Taiwan at the time. It's called the Sunflower Movement. Very few people outside of Taiwan know what the Sunflower Movement is. It was a spontaneous movement between an alliance between students and social activists on the island that first started in the university, went into the street, and that's very unusual when you know Taiwan. They are not, it's not
Very
France or Italy. You don't go and demonstrate outside in the street. It's out of character. But they were by the tens of thousands. And then they basically storm the legislative body, which is quite known for its pugilist ability.
Yes. Yeah, they're not shy.
They're not shy about expressing their positions.
Physically.
And so, and the police kind of were caught between a rock and a hard place, because if they overreacted, which they ultimately did, it would really hurt the KMT chances in the following election. So, which is exactly what happened. But in the meantime, the legislative body, which was controlled by the DPP, ended up passing laws that would nullify all what President Ma did. And then Ma also did something that the Taiwanese really didn't like, which was he cut the defense budget tremendously, fired a lot of loyalist officers, and put some straw people in place. So it was a moment where the popular opinion in Taiwan, which was kind of wishy-washy about everything. They didn't want to create waves, but at the same time, they didn't want to be imposed a way of life that they didn't want. And Ma was the initiator of that movement, which led to the arrival back in power of the DPP, even though Chiang Shui-bian administration had been a disaster. And Tsai Ing-wen, the current president, whom I've met at the American Club several times, and she didn't strike me as somebody that would be that tough, because she's kind of academics. She's she speaks English fluently. She's a very smart woman, but she's kind of you would see her more in a university environment than in the tough and tumble Taiwanese political arena. But she has held firm, and she has been smart. She has not overreacted. She has been steady, and she has kept the DPP, which is known for having a lot of little local warlords that want to. She has kept them in line. She's a tough cookie. She's petite, but she is very determined. And basically now the population of Taiwan is over 85% for being independent and not having any kind of negotiation with China. And the younger generation especially is dead set against a Chinese takeover. And Chairman Xi, by imposing his will in Hong Kong 2 years ago and really clamping down on the democratic movement in Hong Kong, basically seal that idea against the idea of one country, two system. The people understand very well it is just a slogan, and it will never happen in reality, and they do not want that. An interesting side thing is that organized crime is strong on Taiwan, just like in Japan, and the KMT had used some of the gangs that they brought from Shanghai to kind of do their dirty work over the years, and they did until the 1980s. And so that's the Bamboo Gang. And they are triads, basically, and they deal in prostitution, drug trafficking, and all those things. But for many years, they were the people doing the dirty work against the opposition for the KMT. And now the Celestial Sons, who are more along the side of a Japanese organized crime family that are of Taiwanese origin has kind of taken over. So it's kind of very interesting. It's a multi-layer issue, and to say that basically if China bombs Guam or American bases in Japan, it would be an equivalent of Pearl Harbor all over again. And that would really make it impossible for the United States not to go into the fight, even though we might be at a disadvantage at the beginning. But it's something to consider. It's there are strong movement in the Congress, especially in the Senate, for us to regularize diplomatic relation with Taiwan, which would be a kind of crossing of the Rubicon for the CCP. But the U.S. is not the only one about that. And then now, of course, we've talked about the AUKUS alliance, which is the Anglo-Saxon alliance, which intends to bring Japan and India in their circle to counter China. And then, of course, the Biden administration in this deal has made it clear that they want NATO to join in, even though NATO was originally organized to defend against the Soviet Union, which has no more use since 1989.
Well, we got the Brits already out here, so.
Huh?
I said we already got the Brits out here, so.
Yeah, and the Brits are out here because that's the old Anglo-Saxon alliance. It's a preferred alliance. Now the non-Anglo-Saxon in the NATO things are kind of starting to ask questions. So the Biden administration is all over the board on this, just like the Obama administration was. That is not surprising because it's basically the same people. It is the Biden administration is the second-hand knives that used to be in the Obama administration. Now they are the number one knives. So we'll see where we're going with this. There will be, like Victor David Hanson very well underlined, the danger is always the moment of transition. When the pendulum goes from one side to the other, the danger is always for your allies not to understand what you're trying to achieve, and for your enemies to misread what you're doing, right? Because that instability of the pendulum, what it is doing being in the arc, is where you could have very bad reactions happening. And that ties in a little bit in the story of the submarine that ran into a foreign object, which kind of is. I subscribe to several defense magazines from Britain and Europe, and they were laughing. They were remembering the last incident of that sort, which was in 1981, when a British nuclear sub ran into an object in the water, which turned out to be a Soviet submarine that had slowed down and was making a turn. Mm-hmm. And they were coming a little too fast on his back because they were following him. Mm-hmm. And basically what they were saying was that during the exercise that happened with the Queen Elizabeth and I think it was the Carl Vinson, the submarines protecting the task force were following Chinese submarines, and one of them apparently came a little too close and ran into the Chinese they were following, and the Chinese didn't know they were there. So, but they had. So, this is very similar to that 1981 incident, and shows the very dangerous game that is being played underwater between submarines. The Chinese do not have the nuclear technology, they have it for the submarines, but their submarines are not very silent. They are easy to find. Unlike the U.S. and Russian or French submarines, they are very easy to be detected, and that is an issue for them. This is why, if you saw over the weekend, 2 people got arrested for stealing nuclear submarine secrets for the profit of a foreign, quote-unquote, power in Virginia. I don't know if you saw it.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah, they were arrested in
So, it's all tied up. The Chinese are trying to catch up on building submarines that are silent and efficient, and they do not have the technology. And what they are doing, as they have done in the last 60 years, when they do not have the technology, they go and steal it from somebody.
Let me ask you about something that happened about, I don't know, it was about 7 or 8 years ago now. Here in Guam, there was one of those annual exercises in the area, like Cope North or something like that, and they had invited Chinese observers to be on our ships, on the flagship during the exercises to observe. And they had turned down the invitation, and then during the exercise, a Chinese submarine had gone through the exercise and surfaced between Guam and Rota, came up, and do you remember that incident?
Yeah.
Yeah, they came up and they let everyone know that they were there, and then they went back down and through the exercise again, and we hadn't detected them.
Well, there is two sides of this story. It's submariners, their job is not to be detected.
Right.
So that might have been the propaganda story. Most likely when a submarine surfaced like this, is somebody forced him to surface. So there is a lot of dangerous game being played underwater. Submariners is not it's not a game for feeble minds and feeble nervous system. They are playing very dangerous game. They push each other. They are chasing each other. And, what I had heard from well-known people in the Navy was that they had forced them to pull out. We expect that the Chinese are going to come and spy on naval exercise. This is a game nations play. When the Soviet Union was still functioning, they used to be extremely good with their submarines at following our exercise. And they also did something that the Chinese have copied, which was to have fleets of quote-unquote fishing vessels
Russian
that would follow our armadas and were nothing else but electronic surveillance ships. And so there are all kinds of games being played. They have planes with countermeasure that fly over. They have all kind of things. So, and then sometimes they play chicken. And submariners, and they are. It's probably the most secretive branch of the Navy. They do play a lot of chicken with what they perceive as enemies on the water. So this is also part of their training. In order to stay sharp for a possible conflict, they have to hone their skills as better as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a difficult thing. We have to see. The danger right now is that the Xi administration perceive the weakness of the Biden administration as being an opportunity, and the challenge for the Biden administration is to make sure that the Chinese don't make that mistakes. We'll see how that turns out. It's not all that clear that the people in charge both at the State Department and the Defense Department, are that capable because they are too political.
Can we hold
Huh?
it right there and take a break and come right back
Yeah,
to this?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Jose, let's go ahead and take our final break of the day, and we'll come right back with Frenchie to close up the show.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Their services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. You can see the horses lining up, but you can't see the chicken of the sea.
I thought that was the name of the Italian Navy in World War II.
Chicken of the sea?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they got like they sort of self-scuttled before they, so it wouldn't.
No, they didn't actually. The British sank them in a very daring operation in Italy, where they basically inspired the Japanese for their attack on Pearl Harbor. They did a torpedo attack on ship on anchors. Yeah.
Oh,
it's a little known fact. If you want to do some research on your own, Jane's Defense Weekly and Jane's Defense Magazine, who are edited in Britain, are probably one of the better documented English language defense reviews outside of specialized think tank.
Mm-hmm.
But what I see more than a conflict, and we have to hope that there is no military conflict, we would be in a very bad spot here on Guam.
Mm-hmm. Hence the Iron Dome.
well, no, but plus we do not have a civil defense. We do not have a civil defense in place. We have a civil defense for earthquakes and typhoon, but we have nothing for military conflict.
What would be needed?
Well, a program like the Swiss or the Italians or other countries do, the Swedish, and which would be to make it possible for new homes that are being built to have bomb shelters, and with NBC capabilities, and also to be able to retrofit as best as we can the existing buildings, and for people like that live in those ramshackles, tin roof huts in the jungle. They would be able to go in places like underground parking lot and things like this. Taiwan has this system. Like in Taipei, if you look very carefully when you enter a parking that's underground, sometime 8 or 10 floors down, despite and they have pumps so it doesn't flood and all those things. They have civilian areas for people to take refuge, and they also, a lot of the new building codes are requesting a safe room area for when they're doing the buildings, because you need to be able to protect the non-combatant population to the best we can, and also transfer the emergency, that would be a feast in Taiwan, basically to be able to transfer GMH underground.
Well, you know, this is I'm glad you brought this up, because what is it that we ourselves could be doing here, since we're already on the front line and we can't edge our way out of the picture. We're in the picture. So, and in fact, the house I'm living in now, my dad's house, has a bomb shelter. It's under the floor of the kitchen, and it has a 2/3 height door, one window, and it has never leaked a drop since it was built back in the mid-'70s. And it's very, very easy to make that and it's on the opposite side of the building from Anderson. Anyway, we're going to have to pick this up again on another day, Frenchie.
Because it has consequences, for example, on the cost of new housing and everything. So it's a hot potato politically.
Oh, let's talk about it, okay?
All right.
Thank you very much for the call today, Frenchie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that does it for today's edition of Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty. I'll be back again tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. Ray Gibson will be here tomorrow at 6. Stay tuned. Tune back in tomorrow, and have a great evening, everyone.
The Point is KUSG, Hagatna, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Migrants released into the country. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Leaked federal documents say the Biden administration has released more than 70,000 illegal border crossers into the U.S. in only a matter of weeks.
Just since August 6th, the administration has released about 32,000 people into the country by granting them parole. That gives them temporary legal status and also allows them to apply for work permits. But under federal law, it's very strict guidelines. It's supposed to only be on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit.
Fox's Bill Maloogian reports another 40,000 were released with an expectation that they'll show up later for immigration hearings. And immigration advocates say Democrats are proposing the government use its existing parole power to let about 7 million migrants stay in the U.S., at least temporarily. Fox News has also learned the administration is planning to allow some Afghan civil servants who worked under the Taliban regime in the late 90s to be exempt from terror-related bans on entering the U.S. if they fulfill other background and screening requirements. The president announcing the Port of Los Angeles will begin operating 24 hours